Ted Cruz. How are you, sir?
Mark, my friend, I am doing terrific. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, Senator Cruz, really on the Democrat side, these are hardcore, full-throated leftists of the worst kind. And yet, you know, to some extent, their views about big centralized government and what they're going to do and so forth has kind of bled into the Republican side a little bit.
Well, sadly it has, and I think that's one of the reasons people are so fed up with Washington is they're fed up with politicians in both parties that don't stand for anything. They're fed up with Republican leadership that gives in to Barack Obama and Harry Reid on fight after fight after fight, and I think that's why the electorate is so frustrated and so looking for someone who will stand with them against the bipartisan corruption of Washington.
It's amazing to me we actually have a candidate who's attacking conservatives. Says part of the problem why not just Republicans, but it's conservatives too. When is the last time conservatives actually ran anything in Washington, D.C.?
Well, Reagan. We haven't in a long time. It has been what I call the Washington cartel, the career politicians that just, you know, you look at the last omnibus bill that Congress just passed. Republican leadership just funded $1 trillion to fund all of Obama's priorities. And so, you know, you're right. Donald Trump is now attacking conservatives and saying it's our fault. Well, it has been the deal makers, the people, frankly, like Donald Trump, that keep cutting deals with Democrats that have gotten us into this mess. And if we just got back to common sense conservative principles, follow the Constitution, we could turn this all around. I believe that's what we're going to do.
You know, at this debate, I understand you have another debate. It's like the Jerry Lewis telethon here, just never ends, these debates. But anyway, so there's going to be another debate, obviously, and I figure Rubio's going to really want to take off after you because, you know, he wants to knock out the quote-unquote conservative challenger to Trump. I figure Trump's going to really take off after you because he views you as the guy on his heels. I figure you're going to get it from all angles, don't you?
Look, I think you're probably right. I think we've seen from both of them that they're going to bring out the chainsaws. And, you know, sadly, the pattern they follow is the pattern of Washington. It's the pattern of projection. So, you know, Marco, for example, attacks me on immigration, which as you know, is, look, you wrote a couple of months ago that those attacks are straight out of the Saul Alinsky manual of take your weakness and attack your opponent for it. And,
well, let me just add for the audience. It is precious. I mean, to say that you have the same view as him because you propose poison pill amendments to the bill. There'd be no bill but for the Gang of Eight that pushed that bill. You wouldn't have to propose anything.
Well, that's exactly right, but it's the Washington strategy. What Marco wants you to think is, well, everyone's bad on immigration, so don't, you know, pay no attention to what he's done on it. And, you know, at this point, the race has really clarified. It is in many ways down to a two-person race between Donald Trump and me. Iowa and New Hampshire have shown that I'm the only candidate that can beat Donald. But you're right, the knives will be out, and both Donald and Marco will be trying to take me out. And at this point, it's a simple choice for voters. Do you want a deal maker, someone that will go and cut deals with Harry Reid and the Democrats and keep growing government? Marco has already shown that he will do that. He did that when he broke his promises to the voters and went to Washington and joined up with Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer to champion, to lead the fight to pass amnesty. And he's shown he's happy to cut deals. That's why the lobbyists in Washington are overwhelmingly supporting Marco, because they know he'll cut deals. And Donald, likewise, is promising to do the same thing. I mean, Donald is no longer even pretending to be a conservative. He's telling us that if he's president, he'll support Bernie Sanders-style socialized medicine, that he'll cut deals with the Democrats. I mean, there's a reason why Harry Reid says he hopes Donald is the nominee, because you know, Donald has supported Harry Reid for years, and Reid said, listen, I can cut deals with Donald. He agrees with me on a lot of issues. And so it's really at this point, a clear choice, I believe, for voters. Do you want a deal maker who will give in to the Democrats and abandon the Constitution, or do you want a principled conservative, a Reagan conservative, who has been consistent as a fiscal conservative, a social conservative, and a national security conservative?
You know, having been there in the Reagan administration for 8 years, having worked in 76 and 80 to get him elected, duking it out with the Republican establishment, there's a bit of myth-telling that's been going on that Reagan had this magnificent relationship with Tip O'Neill. They actually couldn't stand each other. And I want people to know, because this might come up, that Reagan's, primary economic objective was to get those tax cuts through, and he finally got them through in August of his first year. He didn't work out a deal with Tip O'Neill. He went over Tip O'Neill's head. He gave a speech to the nation at the end of July. He talked to the Blue Dog Democrats. O'Neill fought him tooth and nail. He didn't make a deal with O'Neill because O'Neill's deal was no good.
That is exactly right. In 1981, when Reagan was newly elected, O'Neill had a Democratic House. He told Reagan, he said, your tax plan is dead on arrival. Don't even bother to send it over because I've got 20 Democratic votes to kill it. And Reagan, as you said, it wasn't that he sauntered over to the Capitol and poured Tip a drink and used his legendary Irish wit. That wouldn't have worked. Tip wasn't listening. Instead, he went over Congress's head. He went straight to the American people and built a mandate, and thousands upon thousands of people lit up the phone and called Congress. And what happens was Tip's 20 votes became 19, 18, 17, 16, and he changed the rules in Washington. If we're going to do that again, the only way to do it is from the grassroots. And, Mark, I'll give you a really powerful illustration of that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, which is what happened in Iowa. And in particular, the fact that I campaigned in Iowa foursquare opposed to the ethanol mandate. And as you know, everyone considered that political suicide. That's like I'm in South Carolina now. That's like campaigning in South Carolina telling people you're going to mandate South Carolinians wear New York Yankees jerseys. That just is not going to work out well. And my two leading opponents, Marco Rubio and Donald Trump, both attacked me for opposing the ethanol mandate. Indeed, Trump promised not only to keep the cronyism in place, keep the corporate welfare, he said he'd expand it. He'd have even more cronyism in an effort to buy votes. And we saw why so few people take on the corruption in Washington, because what happened was the sitting governor of Iowa, Republican, publicly came out against me, blasted me, told people, vote for anybody but Cruz. Anyone else on that stage will keep the cronyism going. Cruz actually believes this stuff and will end it. His son, who's a major ethanol lobbyist, ran millions of dollars of false attack ads attacking me. And yet, just 2 weeks ago, the people of Iowa did something extraordinary, which is they rose up and they put their country first. They put their kids first. They put their future first. And we not only won Iowa, but we won with the biggest margin, the most votes ever recorded in an Iowa Republican caucus, and that was running against the corruption of the Washington cartel.
Now, Ted Cruz, in South Carolina, these same ethanol people have raised a $1.5 million they're going to spend in a super PAC.
Yep.
That by some guy, Ned Ryan, I think his name is, tied in with the ethanol industry in South Carolina, trying to argue that your defense position is no better than Barack Obama's. These people really, they have the long knives out for you.
It is openly deceptive, but it's why we've got a $19 trillion debt, because it's the corruption. Look, there's a reason Marco Rubio and Donald Trump got in bed with the ethanol mandate, because that's where the money is, that's where the lobbyists are, that's where the corruption is, and we keep buying votes. There's a reason Marco Rubio is such a big supporter of sugar subsidies, because in his home state of Florida, that makes people very, very rich, and those people in turn write checks to him. And the only people that lose are our kids and grandkids that get bankrupted. And if you want a leader to stand up to it, look, Ronald Reagan stood up to it, but he understood the real power is not with the lobbyists and money in Washington. It's not the career politicians. It's with the people. But, you mentioned a minute ago the attack that the Washington cartel loves to say, well, gosh, Cruz, people in Washington don't like him. Listen, the reason people in Washington don't like me is I stand up and say, no, we're not going to bankrupt our kids and grandkids. No favoritism, no cronyism for anyone, and all the mandates, all the subsidies let's fight for the working men and women, not the rich and powerful connected lobbyists in Washington, and that makes Washington politicians very unhappy.
All right, Senator Cruz, if people want to help you or find out more about your campaign, where do they go?
Our website is tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, and we're just 8 days out from South Carolina. South Carolina is an unbelievably important primary. As I said, it's really come down between me and Donald Trump. You know, Donald is someone who, for most of his life, has described himself as very, very pro-choice and a supporter of partial birth abortion. He's someone, both Marco Rubio and Donald Trump have said that we have to surrender and accept the Supreme Court's gay marriage ruling, that it is the law of the land and we should accept it and move on. That's the reason. Look, I disagree with them on that. If you want a conservative who will defend life, who will defend marriage, who will defend religious liberty, who will defend the Second Amendment, then you've got a clear choice. And so I would ask everyone listening, number one, go to tedcruz.org, sign up, contribute, join us. But number two, if you are in South Carolina, come out and vote on the 20th. Bring your friends, bring your families. If you know people in South Carolina, pick up the phone and come out, because this South Carolina primary is immensely important, and we are on the verge of nominating the first Reagan conservative since 1984. Mm-hmm. And Washington is terrified. It's why they're running millions and millions in false attack ads. And the only people who have the power to break what Washington is doing is we, the people, the grassroots.
All right, Senator Cruz, thank you, and be safe.
Thank you, Mark. God bless you.